Hi, it's Mark from the Digging Deep podcast. Just a quick one before we get started. Over the past few weeks, we've had more than 15,000 views and listens across the podcast, which is brilliant. So first of all, thank you. But what we are seeing is that a lot of people are watching and listening and not subscribing. So if you are enjoying the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to subscribe, whether that's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. It makes a big difference and helps us keep growing, bringing in great guests and improving the show each week. Also, give us a follow on social to keep up with everything we've got going on. Right, let's get on with this week's episode.
You're just all panicking for nothing. You set up yet, Mark?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready, mate. Yeah, I don't know why it's such a big deal. It's good.
Oh God, good to have you back, Liam. Not good to see you. Have you sorted out your internet crisis that we had last time? Have you come away from that AOL dial-up that you had?
Yeah, I've been feeding the hamsters and that, and I'm pleased to report there's much better service on the internet now than there has been previously, and I don't look like a Duplo block either today.
I thought that. I don't want to say anything about your demolition skills, but I thought you was going to go back to the old days of the club hammer and the chisel.
The wrecking ball.
Yeah. The old wrecking ball. But no, it's good to have you on again, Liam. But nobody's seen you the first time. But
no. Technical issues.
Just for those who catching up, we did have some technical issues last time. I think Liam was holidaying somewhere in the universe on the moon. After what Trump's let out about the UFOs, he could have been anywhere. I don't know if you've seen that.
And it's now a Liam Moore Roblox character available.
If you need to download.
Only cost a £5.
Oh dear.
It's good to have you on. I thought, Liam's, you've always got a passion for different, before training, and you was always involved with me. I've known Liam for a long time as an operator, and what we're going to do today is probably talk about a bit of that, but go back a little bit with Liam. You know, he's been in the industry a long time, a lot of experience, and then, you know, the training passion that you've always had and what you've seen in the industry. And we're not talking to Liam as a trainer as such, but as somebody that supports people within the industry, and having risen from an operator to the lofty position he is at the moment. And I thought we'd call it, you know, something along the lines of we train them, then lose them, you know, and the construction retention crisis that we're having. But before we get into that, has anyone got anything that's pissed them off this week and it's doing their head in?
I'm happy to dive right in as I normally do. I'll tell you what's doing my head in this week, right, is at what stage, because there's obviously a common measurement, at what stage do we accept that cars are wider now and car parking spaces need to be wider? Do you know what I mean? Because you pull in, right, and it's like the white lines are on either side of your tyres now. And if you're 6'3" like me, I literally open the door and I've got that much to get out. And I'm literally like, I'm throwing shapes. I'm throwing shapes to get out of the car.
Yeah, but there's nothing more embarrassing, like, because I'm 6 foot wide, so there's nothing more embarrassing when you go in and you go, yeah, I can't get out of there, and you've got to reposition the whole car.
What to be able to get out?
Is that kind of a myth though?
No, car parking spaces. I think someone once said to me a few weeks ago, and some of our listeners might be able to confirm or deny this, but someone said to me that the measurement of a garage for a house was based on a 1970s Austin Maestro or something, because even a modern car, if you put a modern car in an older garage, you can drive the car in, but you can't get out. And if you look at it, now we've got SUVs, 4x4s, and then what you notice is on the electric cars, they're wider as well to cater for the battery array. So cars are wider today, and if you know, we're all moaning about the dings up the doors, but no one's actually got a choice.
No, I've just checked it out because I wanted to be sure, but yeah, the Mini Cooper was 1.4 wide, and now it's 1.73 wide. So yeah, even if you've got a small car, not that you'd ever get in well, both of you, so not being disrespectful, I don't foresee both of you getting into a Mini Cooper somehow. I remember though that my old boss Mark Montgomery, who's probably taller than you, Mark, believe it or not, and we was in Maastricht, and we had to drive back to. He had flown into Cologne, I believe, and then drove over to Holland, and I had got straight in, and then we had to drive back to Cologne, I think, or something like that. And I'm not the smallest of guys either, and he turned up in one of those Fiat 500s. I've got a picture somewhere. It was like something off like a cartoon, Penelope Pit Stop. It was all bowled in like that, you know what I mean, trying to get down the motorway. So yeah, I get you. But yeah, anything that's doing your head in Liam? I think you did say something about wigs before, but I don't know if that's still doing your head.
I just I can't believe the amount of wigs that are out there. Had a couple of embarrassing situations where you're meeting people and you're on the sites and they've got it on and you're trying to keep a straight face and you're trying not to look at them, and then you're thinking, what is that abomination on their head? And then they bend down to sign in on the site register and the wig lifts up at the back and they've got the draft going up through, and I just think, when you take your helmet off, is the wig going to come off with it?
Yeah, what?
But there's a lot of people having the old hair transplants now as well, so you get those people that come in and say, oh, I not feel very good. I have a week off. Yeah, okay, see you next week. Come back in. All of a sudden, they got a whole new forehead.
Well, yeah, it's worked for Wayne Rooney. I've seen him on the telly recently. He's still got that head of hair. He had that famous transplant, The
old stitching.
As you can see, me and Mark, we haven't gone through that yet. Mark looks a little bit bolder than he did last episode, so maybe he's getting prepared.
Well, I've noticed it's working its way back, and I reckon, and this is a bad thing to say, I reckon that if I went for a hair transplant, they'd say to me, "Where do you want me to get the hair from?" Then,
yeah. Where are we going to start? Where are we going to start from? Yeah, absolutely, craziness. But yeah, I suppose I don't know why that would be doing your head in, though, Liam. What's the problem? You've got a fine head of hair. Although look,
if I part that, it's like parting the sea. It's there. Look, I mean, I just think grow old gracefully, go bald gracefully, and I'm sure you can spend your money on other things rather than just paying all that money to have something stuck on your head. But maybe not even so much the transplants, it's just the wigs. I just don't get the wigs because they look, no disrespect to anyone, they look frigging awful. When you see, I mean, it looks like you've got a dead cat or a beaver sat on your head and it's just going round. It just doesn't fit, it doesn't match. You've got different two-tone colour between, it comes in on the sideburns. I don't get it. I just don't get it. How can you trust anyone that's wearing that? But maybe that's just me.
I think that there's a new one though. I've seen that they glue it to your head and they shave it off, glue it to your head. And there's a guy on TikTok that does it, and I think it looks quite good. Maybe next week I'll turn up with one.
Next podcast, everyone in the toupee.
Yeah.
I might do that. When you say, do you know what makes me laugh? It's the denial, isn't it? You go, "Oh, Bob, you look a bit different." I go, "No, I don't.
Nothing's changed."
Nothing's changed. You go, "No, it's something, I can't work out what it is." No. And they're in denial, aren't they?
I think you could get people on your back, Liam, because like Mark mentioned one time about a nickname of a girl that went into the water. It was her first day starting at work with us, and we were talking about people that had started work, mishaps on their first day, and in this part of Essex there had been a flood and the banks of the river had flooded the whole road, and she was driving down the road in her small car and she missed the road and went in to the big bit. Now she had to swim to the bank. This is her first day, can you imagine it? so Mark nicknamed her U-boat. Now, the thing was, right, she thought that was funny because she had that kind of, well, what can you do about it?
Yeah.
But this woman from Germany, there's Germans, right, got right on Mark. She cut that piece out of our podcast and put it on her own. And we got about 180,000 views for that. But, you've got to be careful about, I was going to turn around and say, you're worrying about wigs. You want to turn up to meet someone called that you've only spoke to on the phone that I'd had to, and I won't even mention the company, called Chris. Good, deep, quick, good voice, Chris. And then turn up to find out that Chris was actually Christine. And he was probably Christopher last week, but he's now Christine this week. And he had the most ridiculous wig on you've ever seen. And hands bigger than fucking, like, you can imagine, like Tyson. And that's quite off-putting when you're looking at that wig, because all you can see that you don't think that he's put it on correctly. I don't think he's probably used to being the So we'll probably get slaughtered now. No, you just want to go. You want to go up to him and go, look, just put that, get that curled under. Yeah. Anyway, but look, let's get into it. Look, I want to talk. We're talking about what's doing your head in. I haven't really got much about what's doing my head in this week. Believe it or not, I've had quite a good week. Just giving you I've just finished my second book. Believe it or not, I've written one book, and dealing with publishers probably doing me head in. And one book is a self-help book. Goes with the other podcast I'm doing called Not Finished Yet, and it's about reinventing yourself after the age of 40. And then the book that I've been trying to do for probably over a year now, and just finished it, is a Sunday football book about my old Sunday football team and the scrapes we got up to. But so I haven't really got anything apart from that. Maybe a bit of publicity there. Maybe people will tune in when we get this going and will buy me books. So I can pay. What you hope with a book is you hope that you can pay back the fucking publishing costs, right? And if you do, if you get your 5 mates to buy your book, £100 each, then you broke even. if you don't, then it's something to say that you can. One of those books that you'll put on the back there, and you probably never flip through it again. No, but seriously, nothing doing my head in this week. But I thought, well, why don't we talk about what's doing our heads in with training, retention, and the future of construction? Get straight into it. Let's look at it. Construction keeps talking about the skill shortage, as we said. We've talked about that over and over again since we've been in the career. I don't think when I first entered there was a skill shortage. Yeah, I think I did the first ever. Well, in actual fact, you was involved, Liam, when we talked about the nationwide. We tried to get the nationwide Federation of Operators and Engineers going, or something like that it was called. And at that time, the stats were horrendous when we did actually get some off the CPCS, which was that 7.4% of our industry were leaving the industry, and 6.3 was coming into the industry. So we were losing over 1% a year, which doesn't sound a lot, but it is. And the average age of a dozer driver at the time was 54. And everyone was moaning about autonomous vehicles, talking about autonomous vehicles coming into that was ages ago. And you're thinking, well, if you don't get people into the industry, then that 54-year-old in 10 years' time, which it is now, they've all retired. So you better hope that they come up with an autonomous vehicle, because I don't know how we're going to get around it. But, we bring people into the industry, we train them up, we spend money on apprenticeships, and then somehow we lose them. So today, obviously, we're joined by Liam Moore, someone who's been in the industry from both sides, from an excavator operator to the head of operations in Demolition. So, Liam, straight in, what's doing your head in right now about this industry?
I think there's just a general lack of skilled people out there in the workforce. I'm probably one of the last. I mean, I'm 42 now. I'm probably one of the last generations that had the ability when I was a teenager and that to go out with my father, and when it was quiet and permitting and that, you'd be able to have 10 minutes on the machine or during the lunch break. You can't do that anymore, and probably rightly so. But where do you go to go and get the experience that you need? Because I think you've said previously on the podcast, it's one thing to go and get your blue card or your red card to say that you're trained, and it's another thing actually to have the skill set. And from my own personal experience, I went and spent 2 weeks in Bournemouth in a sandpit, ended up with my Red 360 card, and then actually when I went out onto site, it was a completely different ball game, and I found it really, really tough. So we struggled to get them into the industry genuinely, and I think that has improved over time, and certainly now a lot of the major players in the UK are supporting apprenticeships and promoting apprenticeships, and it all looks very woolly and fluffy when you're doing the tendering stages for larger projects. But it's then, as you said, it's trying. I think it's a two pronged approach really. One is you're struggling to get them in, but then it's, as you rightly said, Mark, it's trying to retain and keep them. And I think what's doing my head in is that you fight tooth and nail to get the people in with the right attitude and the right work ethic, and you train them. Then you've got the pain of trying to get them that experience on site that they can become to what you would call a satisfactory and competent level, but then trying to keep them engaged and trying to retain them before they start going, oh, this isn't for me, I want to drop out. I mean, I actually did some research offline, if you like, prior to today's podcast, and as you said, Mark, we were the pioneers really 10 odd years ago, looking at some of the first apprenticeships that were coming out in the sector. And out of the 8 people that I've spoken to, only one of those is still in the industry, but surprisingly enough is working over in the States, in New York. So they're not even, the UK isn't even benefiting from that skill set, that investment, that training that we've put into him as an individual. The United States of America is benefiting from that, as he now talks about emigrating out there full time and moving out there and setting up a family. So yeah, trying to retain them is a real challenge.
Yeah, because nobody really talks enough. We always talk about getting people in, but nobody ever talks about why they leave. Do you think construction generally looks after people once they're in, or what's your view on that?
I think probably during what I would say is a woolly fluffy stage of their apprenticeship, and they have an apprenticeship officer or they have a mentor during that, then yes, they are well looked after. I think the challenge comes once they've had the finish line go across and they're qualified and they're competent. I'm not saying all companies or whatever, but they're kind of, I think, then left to fend for themselves, if you like. And typically, particularly if you're talking about plant operation, it's a bit of a nomad. You normally go where the work is. You may not always be able to necessarily guarantee, longevity of work in one particular location or spot. So they go where the work is. It is a struggle, and I think we probably need to, like you say, it's all very good at the front end talking about we've got apprenticeships and we support them. If we're being honest with ourselves, again, I've seen it when I've gone out onto projects and I've said, look, we've got a couple of young individuals. How would you feel about them coming onto the site? Oh no, not here. Okay, so where do you put them?
We did that before. Do you remember the time that, and we can talk about them because they're not in or Carillion. I think the guy came to you, didn't he, and said, "Oh, we've got this perfect apprentice. Do you want to take him on?" We took him on training through Bircham Union. Then, when we were really pleased with ourselves, we thought this would be a great test case. We went back to the same guy and said, "Here you go. Here's that guy ready for you. He's a red card now." He goes, "Oh, we can't have him on the site. He's not experienced enough." It was just a farce. And do you know what really winds me up about things as well? You're talking about a nomadic industry, and we've got to change the way we are. Surely, if somebody paid, rather than put these operators drive around in CIS, surely if you took these people on, they could do other things as well. Now, what really winds me up is we're always looking for gangers, engineers, different things all the time, and then operators. And you think, well, there's a guy like, so let's take you, Liam. If you were still on the machine, I'd be looking at you thinking, I've got 30 odd years experience here on not operating the machines necessarily, but on construction and in infrastructure works, that I could probably drag that out of your head and go, do you know what, Liam, I ain't got no work for you at the moment on the machine, but why don't you stay here and help us and be a ganger or be whatever? And we don't think like that. And maybe that's why people leave the industry. But Mark, you must have some stats on this. You're being a bit quiet today.
Yeah, that's because I just can't stop laughing at the moment. But yeah, I've got a few stats just to give people a bit, just kind of frame the issue we've got is UK construction needs roughly 47 to 48,000 extra workers every year through to 2029. So that equates to 239,000 additional workers over 5 years. Construction already employs around 2.7 to 2.8 million people, but recruitment demand is outstripping supply. The age profile, as you mentioned, Mark and Liam, is a concern. 32% of the workforce is over 50, while 10% are under 25. One of the biggest industry concerns is not simply getting trained, it's keeping them after training, which you guys have been talking about. Retention is repeatedly highlighted by construction industry plans, but do we really do it? ITB recently reported support for over 5,900 apprenticeship starts, which is up 43% year on year, showing a good effort, a recruitment effort. And there's a lot of talk about how many can we attract, but how many still work in construction 3 or 5 years later? I suppose the question is, we're not just struggling to recruit, we're struggling to keep people.
Yeah,
They don't publicise that, do they?
No.
Like they're always publishing and saying about how many are coming in, but how many are going out?
Yeah, and I bet it's a high number.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, because we don't know how to manage that nomadic kind of way. We don't know how to. We never have done. Contract by contract, and I don't know the answer either. By the way, I'm not stating the obvious that if there's no work, there's no work, is there? But that's why I think that sometimes we're in the times that have gone by. That when I first started as an apprentice carpenter, I would have multi-skilled people on site. The guy would be able to use the excavator. He would be able to stand there and help with the concrete. He would do more than just drive and sit in the excavator. And perhaps on operator side, at least, we've boxed ourselves in, or maybe not, maybe in all trades, we've boxed ourselves in that this is my skill set. And we've got to really get that guy to just stay within that skill set, because then he's going to have the experience. But then he loses that faith in the industry because really what he needs is a consistency of work, not necessarily a consistency of working on that one piece of equipment or in that part of the site. But let's go back a little bit, Liam. Let's rewind a little bit. How did you actually get into the industry? Let's talk about that.
So my journey. My father had a construction business, never wanted to be involved in it, thought it was a dirty, mucky trade and said, keep out of it, go and do something else. And, he did have a hard life and obviously running a small business was tough. So I suppose I was always pushed away from the industry and from the trade. But I got to 21 years of age. I was in a completely different. For those people that know me, I was in the West End and theatres and musicals and all the lovely stuff there. But I wasn't happy, and I just started thinking about.
Some would say you're still performing.
Well, indeed, you never lose the flair. Once you've got the flair, darling, it's always there. Before you move in, I'd like to just quash a rumour about that, because you started off by saying that it was a real mucky, horrible industry. But when you actually got on the machine, and we'll talk about that in a second, is it true that you used to have a separate piece of carpet for every type of machine that you used to be able to lay, and then you have your slippers on when you was driving, so it was all clean inside? Yeah, my nickname was Polish on a couple of companies, and I was terrorised for that. So no, just to reframe, that's what I was told the perception was, and certainly going through the careers, the careers officer and the educational system at school, it was always go and be a high flyer, if you like, go and do everything else but join the construction industry. Got to 21, and I thought, no, I really want to do it. I love machinery. I love plant and equipment. I'm going to go and do it. And so I decided to fork out myself, funded myself, went down, as I mentioned earlier, and did 2 weeks in a sandpit. come out of my 360 above and below 10 tons as a red trained operator, and I began my pilgrimage, if you like, going through and working on sites primarily within the demolition sector, but also, as you both know, did a stint in plant hire to try and cut me teeth on driving equipment. And I'll be honest with you, once I got a feel for it, once I was involved in it, once I knew actually that it was a good, reputable industry, and it paid well, and it could pay my bills and support me and my lifestyle, I got the bug for it, and I went on to do dump truck. You know, I think I've got 15 categories now. Don't claim to be a master at driving all of them, but you know, it was again having that versatility that if work was quiet on a 360, I could go and drive a 180, or if it was quiet on a 180, I'd go and drive a dump truck. And that's how I kept myself in those early days busy by driving different varieties of plant and equipment.
So what was life as an operator when you first started like?
I think life. I think it's got better as time's gone on. I think sometimes probably you don't always necessarily get the credit. Certainly when I was there, and maybe it was to do with my age. You know, you'd come up with ideas or suggestions, you know, and you were basically told to shut up, and you're here to drive the machine. You just focus on that. And I actually remember one instance where we were doing a job in Guildford, and I looked out the window of the machine, and it looked like all the piles were all over the place. And I said to the site agent, "I don't think you've marked that out correctly." Basically told me, "Shut up." They piled them all, and then of course when the senior engineer came out from that particular company, it cost them thousands. And that was all. You know, if the guy just took 5 minutes to take on board that feedback and criticism from me, I know what a straight line looks like. You know, he could have prevented, you know, thousands of pounds of trying to sort out defective piles. And I think it was, you go where the work is, and you know, in those early days, I spent a lot of time driving around in a van, going where the work was. But you know, you'd go in, and I was taught by my father. You go in and, you know, you do a day's work, and if you need to stay on because there's, you know, concrete wagons coming or something needs to be dropped in, you'd go in early. You know, there wasn't, one of the things that frustrates me now is sometimes I go out to do a safety tour or whatever on a job, and one of the questions I get straight away is, before they've even put their PPE on, is what time are we finishing today? You know,
Yeah.
really? Wow.
So on that note, then, what was the culture like back then compared to now? Is it completely changed?
I don't think it's completely changed. I still, and I might be biased when I say this, I still think probably, you know, plant operators don't maybe get the recognition that they all deserve. You know, I think sometimes if you look at an electrician and a plumber, they're probably held in more of a higher regard than the plant operator. I think it has improved over time. I think some of the larger organisations certainly involve you when it comes to feedback on larger, you know, construction projects, and they value what you have to say. Machinery has definitely got better. You know, some of these machines now have more features, gadgets, and gizmos than a you know, very high branded car. They're very comfortable and smooth to drive compared to some of the older plants and equipment that were out there. You didn't have any aircon, you'd be there absolutely sweating out, or it was, you know, the heater would be broke, or the front window would be missing. You know, it's come a long way, and I think it's I've always said it. If I could earn, you know, better money, you know, on machine driving, I would still be driving the machine. The only reason I left the saddle was to, one, you know, with my children on the way, I needed to provide more money. The way to do that was to step up and become a, you know, supervisor, and then on to management. But yeah, I would have never have left. I thoroughly enjoy it, and even now, on occasions, I go out at the weekend and drive a machine, and you know, I think that's my reset. I go out there, flash the levers around for a few hours, and I come back in and I'm reset and I'm good to go and sit behind a desk again.
So, what, you know, before we get Mark still laughing away about his U-boat joke, but what's disappeared from the industry then since you started? Anything?
I think what's disappeared, and it's hard, and I think again it all culminates together, is that skill set and experience. I was out just the other week we've got people there that are, you know, trying to run the sites. Potentially they've done everything on a, you know, a course, or read it in a textbook, but actually trying to put the practicalities of running and delivering that job into real life, they just don't have that experience. You know, I've seen guys with a 110 yellow lead trying to stick it into a 240 output. Again, where is the skill set there? And, you know, I think that's a real challenge. I was on site the other day with a very good client of ours, and he was talking about, he had this driver, and he said he was, you know, was a really good driver. I looked over to him, and bearing in mind, to say from previous places where I've worked and the amount of operators that I've seen, he was okay. He was an average individual, but I wouldn't have put him on par. But then I actually started saying to myself, a lot of those individuals now have retired out of the industry, and it takes a long time to and if you're not replacing them, for them to get that amount of hours in the saddle. And the guy looked at me and he said, he said, do you not think he's a good operator? And I went, yeah, I suppose if he's turning up on time, he's in the machine, he's doing what you're asking him to do, great. But are you getting the maximum amount of productivity and performance out of him? Maybe not, but you know, that's again just an opinion.
Comes with time, though, doesn't it? I mean, we haven't got the people like old one leg Dave Brooker anymore.
One track.
One track we used to call him. Yeah, that was really funny. Yeah, I remember that. I remember the day he rang me up on the office and he said, "Yeah, Mark, I've got to leave site." And I said, "Why's that, Dave?" He goes, "Well, I've snapped my leg off." What? What do you mean you snapped your leg off? Do you need an ambulance? No, I've just snapped me false leg off. It threw me a little bit. But anyway, what do you think about it, Mark? You know, why do you think this is going the way it's going?
I mean, I've got a little bit more information here as well. I mean, look, the average age of skilled plant operators continues to rise, as we said before. The challenge the industry's got is fewer young people are entering heavy plant and certainly demolition roles. And the industry is increasingly relying on the experienced workforce. So to give us some numbers around that, 35% of construction workers are aged over 50. Workers aged 55 plus have doubled and are rising 13% from 2000 to 24% by 2023. The workforce age profile is heavily concentrated around 50 to 64-year-olds, which is what you said earlier, Mark, there, wasn't it? And only a small percentage of workers in our industry are under 25. A maximum of 20% are under 25. 500,000 workers are expected to retire over the next 10 to 15 years. You know, we've got machines getting smarter, but operators getting harder to find.
So, you know, let's carry on a little bit. I'm going to probably group a few. I had a few questions, but I think they're going to merge into each one. So if we break it down into one thing, and this is just your opinion, Liam, obviously. When you walk on sites today, what you said, maybe it's not that different, but what do younger people, first of all, entering the industry struggle with most, and are we progressing them too quickly, or, you know, for example, is experience being replaced by tickets or certification?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it earlier, Mark, and I think there probably needs to be a more, you know, emphasis and drive in it, that, you know, you need to look at the individuals, and you need to look at them when you're planning as you know, as an organisation, you know, putting the right people in the right spots. So, you know, when I started out, I was very fortunate and blessed that I had a company that was quite, you know, proactive in trying to get new individuals going. But you would go to the jobs that you would do the most simplest of tasks. So, for example, breaking up concrete repetitively with a breaker, or sitting there munching non-stop. But the idea was, it was building up your hours, building up your confidence on the machine, so that you could then go on to, okay, you've mastered those skills, now go and load a lorry, now go and, you know, sometimes now, you know, some of these individuals that are being sent out, you know, via agencies or whatever, you've asked for a particular set of skills, rightly or wrongly, they turn up to site and they land, and you think, oh my goodness me. And, you know, you ask them to say, okay, what I'd like you to do is, and it blows their mind. And, you know, and I don't think that, you know, rather than trying to work with that individual perhaps and try and rejiggle maybe on that project that, you know, around to accommodate it, we just, there might be a thing of, oh well, I don't really want him. As we spoke about earlier, I don't really need this person. Get them gone. And I think that's really really hard. Like you're saying, I've seen it a number of times where people have, particularly in the in the higher sector, they're trying to get it and they just they get signed up. And I've had a few times when individuals have phoned me and said, look, I've got this person, I'm going to have to I'm swapped over. And I said, well, can't you try and facilitate them somewhere on the site? No, I need them swapped over. And I just think, wow, that's so that's quite soul destroying. If you're new to the industry, you're trying to get out there, make a living, and if you've got 3 off hires in one week and a 5-day working week, that you must be thinking, oh, I've got to keep going. I've got to keep going to keep your morale and your focus to keep pushing on. That's tough. And as we all know as well, with the tickets, just because you've got a ticket doesn't mean you are competent. I've got a number of individuals that I know that have gone and got tickets, maybe by default because it was a bit of continuing professional development or whatever with a company, and then you say, oh, you've got a forklift ticket. Yeah, you want to unload that lorry for us? No. And they don't feel they've got the confidence or the ability, but they've got a ticket that says that they can do.
Don't you think that's the problem? That's always been one of my bugbears, right? So you mentioned yourself, I think I've got 15 categories. Now, yeah. That's fantastic for someone who's got experience and I'd say awareness when you go on site of the health and safety needs and stuff like that. So yeah, you might not want to drive a dumper, but you'd get on one, you know how to do it safely. But do you know what? This is the biggest problem I think I've seen in the industry, is that we'll look at the stats and we'll think we've got 300,000 dumper drivers, for example, or 300,000 excavator drivers. But in reality, we've got one person that's got so many categories and they're not driving that dumper, that roller, whatever. So when CITB say, well, we don't need to invest in this, or people say we don't really need to invest too much, it's actually we've only got 50,000 people and they've got 5 or 6 categories each. And it looks like we've got 300,000 operators, but we haven't.
Do you know what, Mark? That's a really valid point, because like you say, take someone like myself. I've got a track shovel ticket. So if you were to go and get the stats, they'd say, as you rightly said, I don't know what the number is. Oh yeah, we've got 400,000 people or whatever that's got a track shovel ticket. But that's probably a silly number. But let's just say you've got 100 in the. That was a silly number. I'll leave the numbers to you. Whatever the number might be. But of course, there are people like me that I can't remember the last time I drove a track shovel. And of course, and then a lot of those people that do hold their cards are people that have left the seat and are now supervisors or site managers, or filled other gaps in the profession, or left the profession altogether. So, as you rightly say, Mark, those stats are wrong. That's not a true reflection. Like you say, I can't remember the last time I drove a track shovel.
But the other issue is the amount of equipment now that we've got on the site. Because I'm just going back to something, I'll say something a little bit funny. I can say it to you, Liam, because I know you've got that sense of humour. But you got to remember, we go back to our Lynch days. Yeah, you were one of the most experienced operators we had, and I just remember us buying a load of new JCBs. I think it was a 130 you went on, and I remember you phoning me up and saying, "Oh, I look a right cock here. I don't know how to release the bucket. This brand new machine, it's not, the release isn't where it used to be." Now we're giving you no indication that you was going to go on that Mark brand new out of the packet, because Lynch is one of them companies. One day a brand new machine will turn up, won't it? Just randomly. And you put that into multiples. I remember sitting in a fucking car park when I had to I was driving a friend's car, and I had an Astra. He had an Astra, and I drove into the car park, and then I had to reverse out. Now, I didn't know how to get the bloody thing into reverse. Now, I've driven loads of cars, and it turned out you had to put underneath the gear stick, you had to pull the thing up and then move it around. And I was there for about half an hour. We didn't have Google in them days. I was ringing everybody to think, and it was like, in Google, it would have been happening. I had a little YouTube program. I had to ring me mate who didn't answer. I had to ring me sister who then said she knew somebody that possibly owned an Astra. So she then rang somebody else who rang somebody else. And eventually we worked out that you could do that. Now, it's the same thing with machinery, isn't it? You put these guys on machines, they go through training, they learn on a JCB, you chuck them on site. Not only are they under pressure to perform, but they're now in a Volvo. And there's no training for that, is there? Really, you just got to get on with it. It's kind of ridiculous. What do you think, Mark? You're a bit quiet there today. What's going on?
For me, look, I completely agree, because I think when you look at it, you get a ticket for driving or operating machines, and then of course you've got updates and new models and different buttons and different things. And I'll tell you what it did was, we all know it was something that threw the whole industry, was when the regen come out on the DPFs. Because of course you've got operators, skilled operators, and they don't know what this thing is coming up on the screen. Cancel, third time cancel. Oh, now the manufacturer's got to come out with a laptop and you're down for 3 days.
Mode.
Why is this in limp mode? Because you pressed cancel 3 times. You know, and there was loads of that.
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
That was. Do you remember? That was the time we had some real trouble with the Terex dump truck. Real trouble. I think there was hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of engine problems with, and Terex got a really bad name because of it. And everyone's saying, well, and Terex. I've had this conversation obviously because I ended up running TDL, that was the Terex dealer at the time, and they had sold all those machines to Lynch, and Lynch had bought quite a few, and everyone they say, oh, you know, it was operator error all that time. You know that, Mark. You know, when you was at Lynch, it was operator error. And I had to say, yeah, look, I kind of agree with you. But I'll tell you the biggest problem that we had with that was that the manufacturers weren't prepared for it. The dealers weren't prepared for it. They never, ever once come around and said, right, they just said, this is the new technology, you've got to put AdBlue in. They never said, this is how you handle it, this is what you do with it, nothing. So they got what they deserved, really, in my opinion. And I think that is a manufacturer's issue. They don't spend enough time on the road taking the machine round to enough operators and saying, look, this is our new machine, this is how it works, this is what you've got to look for, this is what you got. You're meant to find it out yourself. It is farcical. But anyway, we've got to move on a little bit because we're probably going to keep you all day. And I wanted to get on to some retentions in apprenticeships, because obviously you were part of me and the passion of trying to get apprentices in, and we worked on the Trailblazer scenario with the other Lynch, Matt Flannery's, O'Brien's. Everyone was involved to try and get that system working. Bircham Newton, I think you looked after a few of the apprentices at the time, Liam, as well, and you still do, you know. But I want to talk about to both of you, because I know you'll have some stats on this, Mark, as well. You know, how many people are actually losing after training them? Do we know anything about that?
I think while he's looking it up, I mean, I'm sorry, get out of the bag there. Because my heart looks that one up. I think for me, you know, it's something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I love to pass on the skills and knowledge that I've picked up over the years to the next generation. You know, when you actually find an individual that wants to learn, wants to listen, wants to absorb like a sponge that knowledge on operating plant and equipment safely, I've got all the time in the world for them, and I will spill me beans and I'll tell them everything that I can do, probably to the point that they go, that's enough, Liam, for one day. I need to try and digest what you're saying. And I think there are a number of individuals out there that are also, you know, the same. And I know it was something that we were very passionate about a number of years ago when we were all working together collaboratively and trying to encourage people to come on. So yeah, for me, it's really important to try and pass that knowledge on. And
on that point, you know, do we invest? Do companies generally invest in mentoring anymore? And you know, or is everyone just too busy just trying to deliver jobs? What's your take on that? Is that mentoring stuff gone out? Apart from good people like that, you give your own time up. Is that out of the industry?
I mean, probably for me, I'd say it's a mixed bag. I think if you are a big, large organisation and you can have the resource there to facilitate it, and it all looks really good when you're tendering for these fantastic national schemes and projects, or you've got a large regional scheme going on, great. I think the reality is for those more medium to smaller size companies, they're not going to have somebody in there as a dedicated training or apprenticeship officer. If you're lucky, you're going to have somebody that may be doing another role in the company, but is there maybe, I suppose, mentor, but they're doing another 9-to-5 job, if you like, on top of being a mentor. You know, I don't think that a lot of companies would have a dedicated resource to be going out and about, You know, and again, that was fantastic for us, you know, in that large one when we were sending people out to see them on site, how they were interacting with the customers and giving them that support network. But yeah, I think that's a mixed bag depending on the size of the company and how they operate.
Do you guys want me to throw some numbers?
Have you got some numbers there, Mark?
I've got some numbers. Yeah, these are all pre-prepared, obviously,
Fresh off the press.
Let's throw some numbers. So nearly 1 in 2 construction apprentices never complete the training. Current dropout rates are at 47%.
Wow.
A recent report suggests it may be worse in other areas, with 59% of construction apprentices leaving before completion. In 2022-2023, only 8,620 construction apprentices actually reached endpoint assessment. Bearing in mind the industry needs 96,000 plus workers every year. Construction currently has one of the lowest apprenticeship achievement rates, 53 to 58%. The lack of support, as you quite rightly said, Liam, the lack of support is a major factor. 30% of apprentices who quit said the employer's support was the biggest issue. Other reasons cited include high workload, poor organisation, poor quality training support. Employers are still struggling to fill vacancies despite training efforts, suggesting the problem is not just recruitment, it's keeping people in the industry long enough to become skilled workers.
Yeah. Well, let's look on the positives then. Let's build up the industry a little bit, you know, because we're being a bit doom and gloom about it. Let's ask you, Liam, you know, 30 years in, or possibly, you look a bit younger than us, so maybe not quite, but what kept you
25, Mark. I'll take 25.
25. So what kept you here? What's kept you in the industry? For those young boys coming through.
I think for me, and I can only talk about me, I absolutely have a passion for plant and equipment and machinery. I love all sorts of shapes and sizes of diggers, and I love feeling that I'm able to be part of something and achieve something. You know, if I look back on some of the projects that I worked with during the, you know, my plant hire days, you know, if you look at the Surrey Quays extension, if you look at, you know, the early days of constructing the Shard, you know, all of those types of the wall down in Dover that Mark and I did. You know, all of those you've achieved something, and you're proud to be part of that team collaboratively working together. And I've always loved that idea and sense of doing it. The problem with demolition is when you demolish, it's gone. So you only end up going and saying, "Oh, once upon a time there was a building there. Once upon a time there was a building there." But yeah, that's what's kept me infused. And I suppose because of as I've gone on my journey. You know, I haven't been sort of eat, sleep, repeat. I've gone on to fulfil a lot of different roles, and my career's evolved in those different roles. And I suppose I've built a whole career out of it. I think if you were to go back and ask teenage Liam, do you think you'd be in it? I would have probably said to you, no. Now I look back and, you know, as I said earlier, you know, I encourage anyone to get into this industry. I encourage anyone to get into drive and plant, and you can have a fantastic career in it with longevity that will certainly cover and pay for all your bills to have a comfortable lifestyle.
Is there not then an opportunity of a musical in the West End about plant and equipment?
Do you know what? Do you know what? That would be brilliant.
That would be funny, yeah.
Should we get Andrew Lloyd Webber to get stuck into this, or what?
I could start penning that maybe off the back of a digger.
Who would be the bad guy, though?
Oh, I don't know.
Here comes so-and-so.
Yeah. I don't do any impressions now because I'll get pulled up. But
for legal reasons,
no impressions.
Okay, look, what we normally do now, Liam, is get straight into a quick round before final question. I'll give you a quick fire round. One word answer, one sentence, whatever you want to do. So, you up for this?
Go on, lay it on, Mark.
Biggest problem facing construction?
Recruitment, retention.
Okay. Most underrated role on site?
I've got to say, I think it is plant operators are down there with some of the others.
Okay. One thing training providers get wrong?
That it finishes on the day of their exams.
One thing employers get wrong?
Probably not supporting the individuals enough during their career in their early journeys.
Okay. One thing that young people get wrong?
that they're going to have the skills and experience of a veteran overnight.
Yeah, I suppose that goes with everything. And one thing you'd fix tomorrow.
Parking spaces.
Yeah. Parking spaces for the more robust individuals.
Yeah. Okay, so before I get Mark to say, one last question for me, really. After everything you've seen, hopefully you're optimistic about the future of the industry, but what advice would you give someone starting in construction tomorrow?
I think the advice I would give is don't be afraid. Don't judge a book by its cover. Come in and have a chat. More and more companies now have got websites talking about specialist recruitment for people that want to maybe start again. So you're not also typically talking about apprentices that are in a certain age demographic. You've got people that are, perhaps coming out of banking. We took someone on that was a city banker that was in their mid-40s that wanted a complete career change. So again, it's out there. It welcomes anyone of any age, and don't be afraid to approach a company and have a conversation, because I think if you are genuinely interested, those companies will have somebody within that organisation that will make the time to reach out with you and explore it in a little bit more detail. And one of the best things I always like to do is, if they are that interested and you do get a good feeling about someone, is to invite them down to a premises in a safe and controlled condition to have a look around some of the plant and equipment there, for them to get up close and personal to see if that's a career journey that they want to go on.
Mark, anything else from you?
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw something in the bucket for you to and the listeners to think about. So I wonder if some of the problems that we've discussed on this podcast are a result of the subject of our previous podcast. And you gave me this idea, Liam, when you said the guy that's trying to mentor me has actually got his own job, right? Mm. So does that go back then, and I'll put this question to you too, does that go back then to the fact that companies are only making that minimum 2% profit, which then means that they don't have the financial resource to, they can get a guy through a course, quick do your ticket, quick do your course, but then they can't nurture him into the role because they haven't got the financial capacity to nurture him into the role. And there's a question, I suppose. What do you guys think of that? Yeah,
I think that's an overall issue, though, with apprentices, but apprenticeships in general in any industry. But I do feel that's just bullshit as well. If you're in an industry, and I think you've got to spend and invest in that industry. Now, a lot of construction companies would argue that they are investing because they pay the levy, and therefore they're spending that money already, and it's down to those who are clever enough to be able to manipulate to get that funding back and put it into the right parts of their business. But I also think that why would you invest in something, voluntarily or not, and not take advantage of that investment? So if you two are sitting in front of me as two young lads and I've invested and I'm paying the levy, and then you're going off to do your training course, I'm paying for that still. Although I'm getting that money back, and I'm still paying investment in time and someone managing that process. So why would I then throw that away? Surely that investment needs to be held on to and developed, and surely by showing loyalty to you two, that you're going to stay loyal to me. Not always, I get that, because there's a big mistrust in the industry that you train people and they fuck off. Well, you train people and they go because you don't know how to look after them or give them the next carrot. That's what we've talked about with Liam today, is it not? That Liam's progressed his own way, but through the industry, because he started off in one direction and he's ended up progressing throughout his 25, 30 years. So what we need to be able to invest in that to make sure that Liam comes to like a Lynch plant, if you like, as an apprentice, and then goes through the process and becomes out the other end, which pretty much you didn't do your apprenticeship with Lynch when we was at Lynch, but you did progress as an operator into the management role and they gave you that kind of opportunity to do that. But the next step for a Lynch plant would be to have kept you and make you then go on to be like a director in that kind of business. And that's a success story for me. But yeah, that's my thought on it.
Yeah, I think my final word would be yes, it's definitely all linked. Yes, there's a common denominator here, Mark. And like you say, probably unravelled the mackerel this morning, but it's going to uncover the whale. You know, I think it's all linked and it's a much bigger problem, but we probably haven't got time to really probe deep into each and every single avenue on it. And one other thing I'd just like to say is I've just noticed this though, you haven't said anything. I've been playing with this Rubik's Cube this morning, and I don't know if it's on the picture. But yeah, Mark has a neat trick he showed me before we came on to do this podcast, that he can solve any Rubik's Cube. So if you see Mark have a Rubik's Cube handy, and he can sort it out for you.
Well, funny enough, I didn't realise that's what he was playing with. I thought he was playing with. I actually thought he was playing with his phone because he was unprepared with his stats, but we weren't going to say nothing about that. Yeah, so look, closing up then, you know, it seems like this industry, you know, creates incredible careers. I mean, you've had one, Liam, Mark and me have experienced some really good times in the industry, but maybe we need to get better at keeping people once they're here. I think that's the message, and how we do that, I don't know, is open for debate. Maybe people can comment about how they do that. But this has been what's doing your head in special, I suppose, with the legend that is Liam Moore. So if you want to listen, you think someone said something that might help someone you know, then share the episode, you know. But like, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Hey, Mark?
Yeah, lovely. Like, follow, subscribe. We're building up a nice following now, so yeah, please join in.
Lovely. Thank you, Liam. Thanks for coming.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Cheers, guys.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed within this podcast are solely the individuals and do not reflect the opinions and beliefs of the sponsors or its affiliates.